started creating and learning with digital books. Hopefully, all of you can hear me well. One of the reasons why I have this particular topic is because writing and reading are enriched when students get to create a digital book. And there's many different ways you can do this. So if your school year is just ending, this is definitely a way that you can have your students read and write, be creative, get engaged, but also it's a project that's very viable. It's something that you can do within the year. So there's different ways to set it up, and there are even really great books out there, and there's different types of book creation tools, I should say, that make it quite easy. So you can do something like a 45-minute uh, class project where your students go in and they use something like Storyboard.com, and they can create a book quite quickly. Or they can do something where it's a class book where you take something like, for example, if you're the different chapters or units, you can have a big class book where each student creates takes they're responsible for a chapter or a section, and then they create a digital book, one class digital book with something like maybe Boom Writer, or they can do it with something like Google Docs. So it's up to you. You can either have students create their own digital book, and they can create one as a class, or they can create one where they work in pairs or even groups to get it accomplished. Writing is really tough for our students. Many of our students aren't used to the writing process, and they're not really taught well what the writing process is. And we've already talked about how you write with digital tools, but when you think about the writing process, you need to give students time to brainstorm. And because it's creative, it's important that the first part of their writing, that time when you give them to brainstorm, come up with the ideas, that they aren't graded on that. You can give feedback, and feedback's really important. So at this point in time, you can give them, for example, participation, where if they do it, then they get credit for it, or not grade at it, not have a grade at all. But do not mark it. Do not at this point, because writing is pretty scary for our students. Our students walk in the classroom, and when we get them to write, they're sharing a piece of their souls, or they're sharing a piece of their thoughts or ideas, or the way they even form or flow or support, or the research, or what they read, or what they gain in resources when they write. So to share that with 20 other strangers, and then also with the teacher, and then have it all marked, is quite scary. So there should be something at the beginning where you are encouraging them. And the best way to encourage them is they're in this brainstorming phase, to when they're mapping it out or creating an outline of what their book is going to be about, um, to not grade that. So there's at the beginning, what you would do is, for example, give them the topic. So if the topic, for example, is something such as animals, and you can see a few animals in the back. I don't know if you can see the kangaroo in their property. It's really cute, actually. I think there's that kangaroo picture back there. It's very difficult to see, though. So let's say that they're talking about animals, which is in the back there. Then you can take your 5 minutes, do your introduction and your spiel. We're going to talk about animals. We're going to learn about habitats. And then you give them time. Okay, you get 5 minutes to map it out. You can give them either, there's many different ways to map it out. And when you map it out, that depends on the story. They could do this. It's a digital book. So yes, of course, they can use pen and paper. That's fine. Or you can have them use a Google Doc, so that way they can record their brainstorming. Another really great tool for that is Educreation. So if they happen to have a digital device, like an iPad, for example, then you could use something like Educreations. Or you can use something where There's another one. There's a screenwriting whiteboard tool also for and Peggy George, who's usually very good with links, may know the one for Android, but there's basically a one for Android that's like education. And they can write. They can write with the stylus pin, which is a pin that you use to write with mobiles. And then what they can do is they can map out. So a lot of this you can find when we talked about our note taking. So there's actually a note taking presentation. You can find different resources for that, including the one with the Android Edu Creations. And after they do that, then it's important, and they can storyboard. I mean, there's different types of writing. The next step after they do their mapping out, after they do their brainstorming, and they can even sketch note it. That would be very cool. Then they need to conduct research. So they have to have the time. And you can do this many ways. You can either have them go and they can do this as a task at home, or you can have them all take a trip to the library, which is really my favorite way of having students conduct research so they can get very excited. They can interview. So, for example, if they're doing digital storytelling or they're doing where they're creating a character, they could okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and take off my video. Sorry about that. And that way, if we hide the video, then perhaps we see the different slides. So how is this so far? Are we seeing any? Yeah, so hopefully that will change. Where it says conduct research. Hmm, very interesting. How's that? Any better? Are we seeing any second slides? Hmm, very interesting. Well, hopefully it works very easy. Okay, so maybe we need to uh, do that. Hmm. Okay, so we're on the one that says conduct research. Okay, Nelly sees it. Yay! Yay! Okay, good. Fantastic. So we'll see. Well, hopefully this will continue or you see my slides. So maybe you just needed some time to boost. So we're at Conduct Research. Thank you for letting me know. You all are a great audience. So they need that time to be able to conduct research, and they can do this in several ways. One way that I really like a lot is when students start talking, they do surveys, and what they do is they just say they ask their friends about a character they're creating. And but at this point, it's good to also talk about good feedback to let students get comfortable that with criticism, but also to get comfortable giving each other good feedback that sounds positive. Oh, I really like this about your um, I really love this about your character or the way you're taking the story. But perhaps so the research does isn't necessarily about it can it, and it is about whatever topic. So, for example, if they're writing about animals, what are they going to research? Well, they're going to research habitats. They're going to research the characteristics of that particular animal. But when they ask their friends if they've developed a character, for example, if they're doing a character, they might ask, do you like the character? And if it's protagonist, then, well, that would be important to see if he's a likable or she's a likable character. If the character seems real, if the character seems fleshed out, is the character funny? So they can do that kind of research as well, which is more like a focus group. But this makes their writing stronger. The more eyes they have on it, I think the better. They can also have the type of book where they actually don't create everything themselves, but instead this book is more curating the content. And what this refers to, for example, if you're creating your own textbook or you're doing a class textbook with your students, then one of the things you can do is you can have your students You can use one of these tools that actually looks like a book. All your students can collaborate and you can make your own textbook. So if you teach history, you make your own textbook with that, or if you teach science or math, and instead you curate content, you get different sources from around the web to support this textbook and what you're teaching. And there's many great tools for that. One of the ones that I've recently fallen in love with, and many of you know that I have this that I really like Pearl Trees a lot. But recently, I also really like Storify, and Storify makes it to where you can have a book-like type of um, where you could curate something like and create something like a digital textbook online. I think of course though the best one for that type of tool to really make something like a digital textbook. It might be a little complicated. It is a learning curve. It's Life Binders, and all of these are free, by the way. Scoop It isn't. I don't have Scoop It up here because I updated the slides, but they weren't working as well. So unfortunately, I couldn't update it. But Scoop It is another one that I think is really good for curating a book. A Flipboard, and Flipboard's not on there either, and it looks like a magazine. So the only problem with Flipboard is that it doesn't allow you to basically have titles. It doesn't allow you to really have a table of contents or anything like that. With Storify, at least, it lets you upload images, so you can put chapter titles. So that's interesting. And this is curation and social bookmarking. Live Binders gives you a lot of freedom, so you can really make it look like a digital book in a way. And it's easy to read on a mobile device. I've seen a lot of great examples that I'll show you in a bit about where how you can see what this looks like. When you do have groups that are working on a chapter, for example, it's important that you determine roles, duties, and responsibilities. And what that means is that each person, each student, is given a specific task and a deadline. So someone might, if you do this instead as groups, instead of doing it as an individual, they have to take on all the roles. But in a group setting, one may be the researcher, one may gather all the notes, one may be the interviewer, present the characters and get feedback whether they're what needs to be done in that instance. Another might be the team leader who makes sure everybody's on task and things like that. Another one might be a deliverer. The deliverer is going to be someone who talks about the project. This is something that I have had. I put it on my book, Learning to Go, but it's someone who, well, there's a reporter and a deliverer and a note taker. The note taker is different than the reporter, but the deliverer makes sure that I get the book and makes sure that the book is uploaded, formatted in the right proper one. If I'm taking it through a flash stick, then they're the ones who give me that flash stick. So they're the ones that make sure that everything's formatted and that the teacher receives the project and that it meets the criteria. The reporter is the one who talks about the project. So usually each time my students have a project, they have 2 minutes to let the class know, um, to let us know what is it that you had, what are the duties, what are your responsibility. I mean, why did you decide to take the book this way? Why did you develop characters? And so they're the ones who present. And so I do it this way, and I don't have every single student present because I do lots of projects. So eventually somebody will get that responsibility or role. But if you have, for example, 20 students or 40 students, and then you divide that. Okay, so let's say we have 20. If you happen to be fortunate and just have 20, you divide it by 4, that's 5 teams, okay? Now, if you have much more, so you don't have that much time in class to really have different people talk all the time. So I think this is a great way to get your project seen and give them some presentation skills and stuff as well. But there are some great tools and mobile apps for creating quick, fast stories. So you could, if you happen to have, for example, a lab and you want them to go to the lab and they can create a story really quick, that is a definitely a lesson you can have within a day because of these great tools, and they're free. Now, a few things before you do this. When you set this up, the same thing. Have them write the story before they go in the computer lab. This way, you make sure they stay on task. They're working on their story. And let them know we only have a limited time here. After this period, you will not have any time to finish your story. And this makes sure they stay in task. Because if they know they have to pretty much turn in the story right after that, and that includes the editing and everything like that, then your students are going to know, hey, I better go in, I better have my story together. I better type it really fast and then get someone to peer read it or proofread it quite quickly. So these tools allow it. The other thing you have to note with some of these tools, you're going to have to register your students beforehand. So that includes perhaps getting emails. Of course, there's some great tools I'm going to show you there for young learners where you don't need emails. So that would be really great. But these are things to take care of before you go to a computer lab. So you have lots and lots and lots of different tools, more than the ones I'm going to show you. But the reason why I'm not showing you those tools is because I can't show you every single tool. But the easiest way to do a storybook is to do storyboard.com. If you get the teacher edition and you want to get the teacher edition, you get it free for 30 days, so that's good. And it doesn't require credit card or anything, so if you don't do it again, that's fine. But the reason you want to do that is because then you don't need to get your students to have emails. You can just set up their individual accounts. You can even set it up if you have the teacher edition and it's the pro teacher edition to where your students can even work together on the same story, even if they're on different computers. So that's another great benefit if you have, so you can do that for 30 days. So if you do at least one or two projects within that 30 days and you planned it right, then you optimize your Storyboard time there. And then you can decide if you want to get premium or not. But it is definitely, you can choose from a whole bunch of artists, and which was Sean was saying as well. My personal favorite, though, that I like, especially for my language learners, is littlebirdtells.com. Now, none of those, I believe, are apps yet. Of course, I could be wrong. They could have made a Storyboard app since, and I just don't know that. So if somebody knows if there's a Storyboard mobile app, please let me know. There is a Little Bird Tells one, but you have to pay for it, and I don't believe you can create. I believe it just lets you see your stories. So I prefer personally littlebirdtells.com on the web. On the web, the reason why I love it for language learners is because you get to do many things. You get to type out the text. You get to draw whatever it is you want to draw. And then you also get to speak. You get to talk. You get to narrate the story. So for me, all of those come together and really support the different skills: listening, reading, writing, and then also um, speaking. But it also is really good for students. If you have kids and you're teaching young learners, then it helps them with their dexterity. It helps them to be able to practice things like handwriting and drawing and coloring. Now, it's a little bit more difficult when it is online, but you can embed it in different places. You can create a wiki full of the different embeds or Weebly, or you can curate them all using one of the tools we talked about earlier. You can put them all in a flipboard. You can put them all in a class blog. So there's definitely a lot you can do. The other one that's what makes it really easy to create a book, especially for kids, and is safe, is toondoo.com. So Little Bird Tells, toondoo.com, and Storybird are really great and safe for young learners. So if you have students that are 13 and younger, they'll be able to create in it's good. These were made for teachers, so that's why I recommend these. So you may have heard of these before, but I always mention them because they're the most safe, I believe, for teachers. So toondo.com is really great. You can even create comics, so it's something that we saw in the last one as well. This does not have an app as well. The app that it has, I'm not sure what the app does, but it doesn't help you create a book. So no mobile app there. Um, Yes, exactly. And Nellie Doit says there's also Storyboard that, which is a great tool, and teachers love it, especially teachers I introduce, but it isn't free. It only gives you a small amount, and that's why I don't put it as my top one. Although teachers do love that one, so it's good to mention that one too. The other one I didn't put was that I used to put before is Zooburst.com, but Zooburst.com, I've had a lot of teachers tell me recently it's a pop-up 3D book, and your students will love it. But I have a lot of teachers tell me it's very difficult to use. So that is the only reason why I didn't put that. Um, so there's where your students can create a digital book. As well, they can use apps. So the easiest and best way to create a book with an app is Book Creator or iBook Author. Book Creator I mentioned because it's compatible with iOS and Android devices. So that's why I like it. It also has some features for those with literacy that struggle with literacy. So if you have students that have dyslexia, this is a really great tool. The thing about it is if you want to publish it, then yes, you have to pay money. But if you're just keeping it within the class and stuff or just presenting it, then you don't have to pay money. But if you're gonna publish it and have others, which is ideal, that's what you would like to do, then you do have to pay. It's not very expensive. You can also use here's a couple of books written by, and you can see you can do very complicated books that look really nice as well using iBook Author and using Book Creator. Those are the two. But if with the mobile, but if you do that, then you can even use it with adult students, teenagers. There's a lot of research involved. So kind of the projects I'm going to show you, the examples that come all together are, for example, this children's book. It was written by fifth grade, and for those of you in other countries, that's about 11 years old, I believe, 10 or 11. Students, year-old students who are in special education, and they wrote this book. So you can even check out that book. You can download it and check it out. Seventh grade students and seventh grade is probably around 12, I think, or 13 maybe. So I might have gotten the fifth grade wrong. That might be about. So the students aren't, and what they do is an interactive field guide of Florida, and then they have it on the iBook where people can download in the iBook store. So the great thing about Book Creator is then if you do pay and you do publish it, then you can have the iBook store, which is um, where they can I even charge a little for the book if they want, which is a good idea if you do have, for example, you're raising funds for your classroom to get different supplies. So Andre Spang does this. He does it with iBook Author, and what he does, he gets his German students, and you can see kind of the templates and stuff they have. This is all within. When you use an app, one of the great things about the app is, of course, they can do the brainstorming on paper, they're brainstorming on Google Docs, but then when they get back, they do their template as well. They can do their templates and work on that together. Um, Another way to do this, of course, with Google Docs, and this is something that this is an example of a Google Doc one. Of course, she by students from Argentina, and this is from Deborah Tebovich, her students. She gets them to create a book. Her books are really interesting because she works one-on-one with the student, so they create a book of their learning throughout the semester or time with her. On these particular books, these are older students, so that's a good question, Nellie. So if you go to hers are much older, and I wanted to show you the difference between having very young learner books, which is something that you might create in Storyboard or, for example, in ToonDo, versus more sophisticated books. So these would be about teenagers or even older adults as well, that she has them create different books as well. So you can do things like that. But there's other tools as well. Sometimes teachers, this one is called a living textbook, and this was actually, I was giving a keynote in, where is that place? Oh, I forgot. MSU, Michigan State University. And a teacher showed me this one, and she did this through, it's a journalist magazine more than a book, but she calls it the living textbook, and that's what they do throughout the course. And so what they use is WordPress. They use the WordPress template, and it looks like a newspaper, the way they've set it up. And the students interview, they write interviews. So this is an ongoing project that they do. Some teachers have done it on wiki spaces. This is another type of textbook here. It's a digital history textbook. So these are all examples, because if you decide, hey, I want to do this, I want to try this, you can have a book to, there's definitely examples out there, and I've booked them, marked them on. Peggy had shared that within the chat box, where you can find these different examples, and it's under the poetry with ebook listed. And then there's Michael's third grade students. Third grade students are quite young, so they're probably around 8 or 9, maybe. And they have created theirs with light binders, so you can find, and they talk about different things. They talk about science and geography. So you can have, you can see these different examples, and you can decide, well, which is the one that I want, which is going to be the creator, which is the one that seems to jump out, that you say, hey, I'd like to try that tool. And so you don't have to try all these tools, but see the one that's definitely going to be one that you like. And some ideas. Well, one of the things that I've been into lately is learning science and math through cooking. So your students can make a cookbook, and there's quite a few types of cookbooks they can make. They can make a cookbook or a recipe book of leftovers. So they can decide, you can break them up in pairs, and they decide, what could I do with leftovers? They might have to interview a chef. They may have to go and interview a subject matter expert. They may have to interview their mom or their grandmother or their dad or someone to talk about this. You can give them some recipes and things. You can give them the ingredients, and they have to come up with the recipe. They learn the math and science by the conversions. They learn about ounces. They learn about measuring. There's a lot of different things they learn through cooking. They can create books for special diets. So, for example, someone is vegetarian. Someone is allergic to nuts. If someone is allergic to, so they can find, is gluten free, they can make the gluten free book. So, and the great thing about this, they can give this away. So if, for example, you have your, they can identify, you can have them brainstorm different family members who need and require a special type of diet. And what they can do is they can work together if they have family members with the same, and create this book to offer them, to help them figure out, meals that are friendly for their special diet. Like my sister, she would love a vegan book. She loves cooking vegan stuff. It's some in a different language. So what they can do is they can have many different favorite recipes they find on the internet. They might say, oh, I want to make, and then they can translate it into a different language. Or they can have some recipes in one language, like Spanish or Korean or something. And then what they can do is, if you're teaching language, they can translate that into English, or the other way around. They can translate into Korean or Spanish or some other language, French, or something. They could do science goodies. So there are recipes, and you'll find in, I've bookmarked those as well. How to make taffy, and that shows you the science behind taffy, or how to make ice cream, and you learn about the different states of matter. And so there are different recipes that students can make, or slime, or they can make invisible ink. And so it could be a cookbook of science, things that you can use, like how to make blood or how to make things like that. So that's always a very fun one as well that students like to. And they have to show, they actually have to conduct the experiment. Um, and they can even embed little videos. They can embed little audio if they use iBook author, or if they use Book Creator, they can embed sound bites and stuff to go with that. To give tips to say, hey, when I made taffy, for example, the taffy comes out better if you do this. So they can add a little to it. Family recipes and traditions. Each one of us has a recipe that we remember. Growing up, that was always served at a particular time, for example, or maybe that was our favorite. So you can do that as well. Oh, that's great. So I'm going to add that to our bookmarks. Nellie just shared um, her daughter's recipes and sports stuff. So that's very cool. This is what it looks like when you do a recipe book. I've seen them on Isu and I've seen them on slip.it. Just do a search for recipes and you'll see them. And it's really nice because you can do something very simple and nice where it's just a picture, and then you can put the little gray bars and things so you can see examples there. You can have students make digital scrapbooks. So there are great ones for that. A digital scrapbook, I got this idea from Scholastic. Scholastic was really good, where they have, and Peggy offers some good advice when you're doing the finished product of a multimedia book. She says, she goes, I've seen great recipes with ThingLink. They use a photo at the finished product and then put links to step-by-step instructions with images or video audio. So ThingLink, which is on here, is a great way to make it too. Thank you, Peggy, for that advice. You can also do it of the character. So, for example, if you're reading about a character in a novel, let's say you taught Twilight or even Harry Potter or someone, they can take one character and they can make a, what would their book look like now? What would, sort of like a yearbook? What would be their thoughts? They could, who would they write? And they can make these things, these pictures up, and then they put it, and they put their different adventures while they were in the book. So they just visualize. So digital scrapbook. I got this from Scholastic because Scholastic does it with pilgrims. They do it with a girl that was on the Mayflower, and it's a fantastic, that I've talked about before. And it's bookmarked as well as an example, but I think it's a great way to get students involved. You can have older students create books for their younger siblings, a relative, or a younger class. So one of the projects I did with we did with our students is we had, for example, our fifth grade students write for kindergarten class, and we adopted that class, and then they showed them that book. And the great part about it is we actually took the time where they got to read them the book. They got to sit and read. Now, of course, back then we didn't get to use technology, but if you use technology, you can have them create a joke book where they're reading jokes to, and then the little kid, the little young child that they're created the book for, has to try and guess the punchline. So they're learning. And with jokes, you can do math, you can do science, you can do English, you can create joke books on a lot of things. You can do it on learning books where they, for example, an alphabet book, they can create alphabet books for them. You could do ones where it stars them. So if they get little pictures of them, they can put it in. And they could say Johnny as a superhero or Melissa as a superhero, and they can make superhero books with them. They could do finger chants. Those are really popular, and then they sing them with them. And then they can also do different types for math books and things like that. They can do ones. They can create books that really help the community, or help themselves or others. They could do a goal journal, like a running book, and put a bunch of quotes that have to do with running. They could do a study journal with quotes to motivate them to keep studying, do well in school, and give it to another peer classmate. When you create a book, have them give it away. They could do a nature book where they do scrap, where they even include, that was one of the favorite projects my students did. We would take a hike, and then, nowadays you can take pictures, which is more environmentally friendly. You can work with a museum, or you can work with a national park or a park that doesn't get a lot of visitors, and your students can create the book that's a field guide and helps them learn different things about. So they could offer free field guide, and your students, your national parks would really appreciate that. A geocaching book. What if you want to include images? Well, somebody said something earlier about images. I think it was Sean, or someone had mentioned that. So if you mention that again, that would be really great. There is, for example, free public domains with open clipart. All of this is bookmarked. There are Creative Commons as well, which we've already done one on this. So, oh, and Peggy said that there are ones from Storyboard that, and I think somebody said that there were some that you could use that would you don't need to use with Storyboard, but there are ones from Storyboard that, so that's really good. I know Canva has some images as well. Um, and then on Storyboard, yeah, Sean says Storyboard has free images as well. So there's many different ones. Oh, Peggy was saying photosforclass.com, all free as well. So that's really good. Confite is where I find a lot of my Creative Commons story photos. It's important you look at the license and make sure it's available for distribution. So it's not enough that it says Creative Commons. It also has to say that it's allowed to be distributed. And you can do that quite easily. You can look up that license on Flickr, which is why I use Confite, because Confite makes looking for Flickr much easier than looking on Flickr. But you could look on Flickr as well. So the Confite images are mostly Flickr and stock images. So you get the same advantage. CogDog has a really easy way for you to get the attribution, because he has made this bookmarklet, and you can make that for your students. You can create an ebook with calibreebook.com. It's one way to not only not really create, but more read ebooks. So if you create a PDF or anything like that, your students, it's a good way to convert one ebook to another platform. So if you're trying to take you did the ebook on a Google Doc, you saved it as a Word file, you can you can make it into a Kindle form of book. You can make it into EPUB or Mobi quite easily. And of course, you can always go. We did have an open online course on this, 5 weeks. You can access all the materials, all the books. Kathy's here, Taste the Ring, and I think Kathy was part of that and created an ebook as well. Perhaps I could be wrong. I know Peggy took part too, but when you do this, and I don't know if anybody else is here who took part of that book creation, but you can find lots and lots of teacher examples where they created their own ebook in this course. So yes, Sean says you can join every January and February, and that would allow you to create an ebook as well. We do the first chapter of the ebook, and then after that, you get authors. We've had Chuck Sandy, we've had Lindsay Clanfield. You have very famous ELT authors. Jason Renshaw, we study a lot of his materials, and they give you advice, they give you tips. Terry Friedman is definitely a part of it as well. And then we have some of the ones you saw have created ebooks with their students who guide you. Deborah Tevovich, Andre Spang, are both very active in it as well. And we have for all learners. We have some that have created adult books, and we have some that have created books for young learners, like Michelle Ward.